Change my gender, Christian. That is quite welcome when you talk about diversity. Honorable members, dear colleagues, our distinguished moderator, allow me to basically sit on the protocol that has been established. Allow me to recognize the chairperson of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus, Madame Honorable Anne-Marie Mbilambangu from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Allow me to recognize the chairpersons of the various standing committees who are women of the SADC Parliamentary Forum. Allow me then to welcome and recognize Ms. Winnie Banyamina, the UNAIDS Executive Director, and also to recognize my dear colleague, Mr. Anias Schumer, our Regional Director, UNAIDS Regional Support Team for East and Southern Africa. I'd also like to recognize Ms. Nyasha Panisa Sitole, the Regional Lead for Young Women's Leadership. Allow me also to recognize our Executive Directors from SAFES, from the European Parliamentary Forum, from ARASA, and many others who have joined us this afternoon. I hope you have a fruitful deliberation and please feel at home. Today we're meeting honorable members, our distinguished colleagues, and our dear guests of honor with a very heavy heart. We wake up in the morning, we are either struggling with COVID-19 or we are nursing somebody with COVID-19, or we are looking for facilities or services to be able to respond effectively as women to this scourge that has come upon us. Despite that, we come to the table and contribute in our various diversity with the strengths that we have, with a big smile, and nobody will recognize the struggles and challenges that you go through on a daily basis. It is for this reason that I have the greatest pleasure to welcome you to this high-level forum, which has jointly been organized by the SADC Parliamentary Forum in collaboration with UNAIDS, a partner of the SADC Parliamentary Forum since inception, I must mention, of the regional body dealing with issues of HIV and AIDS. As we meet today, we also learn of developments across the world. I'm sure all of us, without exception, are aware of the recent developments concerning the spread of COVID-19. Indeed, European countries such as the United Kingdom and France are yet again going into lockdown, while several countries and regions in the United States, despite the ongoing democratic process, need to operate with severe physical restrictions. Director of Ceremonies, for its part, the SADC region has rolled out multiple strategies since March 2020 to contain the spread of the virus. And there are currently measures imposed to restrain both domestic and international travel at various levels in our own countries. Civil society has come to the table to try and contribute to the strategies that our governments have put on the table. It continues to be a challenge that we must all push and continue to want to address effectively. Movement outside of our homes involves carrying new accessories, such as face masks, such as sanitary gels, and handshakes. Hugs have long disappeared from our routine, and this is something that is very, very difficult to us as women. However, today, as we reflect on the devastation and impact that COVID-19 has had on the SADC citizenry, allow me to underscore the challenges that lockdown and containment measures have brought on women and girls on the African continent. The overload of uncertainty and profound disruptions to women and girls' lives and livelihood has had severe effects, and we must underline that. We now face unique and yet to be resolved setbacks in the social, economic, health, and well-being realms of our communities. And through it all, I must commend the women legislators of SADC who have remained vigilant, who have remained concerned and active. And I wish to affirm the task undertaken by the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus of the forums to commit to address the ravages that COVID-19 is having on the vulnerable segments, and particularly women and girls in all their diversity. Director of Ceremonies, allow me to applaud the significant role that UNAIDS has contributed to hosting this particular meeting with the Regional Women's Parliamentary Forum. The forum is a critical organ of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, and it is important to always be in the vanguard of parliamentary interventions for the advancement of gender equality. Women's empowerment is also critical. Women's rights generally should never be forgotten or in any way neutralized. We recognize the critical role of this organ. It has played very important functions previously, especially when we recall the situational context, such as the spread of HIV and AIDS, tuberculosis, and now COVID-19. Their essential contribution remains ever relevant. We know very well that if we go back in history, it is women who ran hospices for TB. It is women who started off hospices around HIV and AIDS, and many other community interventions. We have observed that the underlying structural determinants have exacerbated the effects of communicable diseases through lessons shared by organizations working with women, by some of our SADC structures in the region. And these have continued to be a more pernicious impact on women and young girls. COVID-19 has reconfirmed this trend. The unfortunate situation is that when resources are scarce, or when families have to choose, it is often women and girls who stand to be sacrificed in the first place. And this is what women legislators, members of parliament should guard against. This is why, due to COVID-19, the education of young girls suffer the most. And it is not surprising that the issues are coming up around CSE, not surprising that issues around teenage pregnancies are becoming much more prevalent. The repression of women and girls indoors have taken a new turn. And these are issues that members of parliament should advocate for. These are issues that members of parliament should assist organizations that are partnering with the forum and parliaments to take a standpoint on the human rights of these young girls and women. We cannot look the other way because COVID-19 has undermined not only the right to education, but also the right to health and the right to physical integrity of women and young girls. While we appreciate that human rights are interdependent, several other rights, such as the right to work or the right to food and the right to water, have been contravened in the COVID-19 period. Yet, there might be little to no remedy available to women who are only waiting for the storm to pass. I therefore commit that I'll continue to both besiege, guide, and support the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus which is an organ of the forum, to continue delving into the identification of issues that widen the gender divide and exacerbate the vulnerabilities of women and young girls in all walks of life. Distinguished colleagues and participants, as we meet today, what is clear is that SADC national parliaments have to be on the forefront of reform. We need to work together to alleviate the risks and protect women and young girls while the effects of COVID-19 wane off and finally disappear. It will be wishful thinking to believe that COVID-19 will vanish in a month or two, or even in 6 months. And hence, there's a need for sustained support that is both holistic and adapted to the country situations that we come from. In most cases, parliaments have not remained inert. They have adapted measures while some are still lagging behind. I'm aware, and we received reports during the 47th Plenary Assembly session, that most of the parliaments in the SADC region have increased their health budget, including through emergency funding since March 2020. Yet, there's still need for more information. There's still need for surveillance data. We also need to account for how these funds have been appropriated and how they've actually been responsive to gender issues and how they've promoted women empowerment. Additionally, through targeted COVID-19 related legislation, we must at least be able to evaluate the impact of this legislation on women and young girls, and whether improvements, if any, will be monitored and reported back to parliaments for accountability. I wish to plead with members of parliament that although COVID-19 appears to be an executive-oriented function, we have a long way to go to give a robust safety net to women and young girls who are affected through entrenched structural determinants and other weaknesses. Today, I'm sure we will have an opportunity to hear from some young people. We'll have an opportunity to discuss and understand better the interplay between COVID-19 and other diseases such as HIV, or even the other linkages with gender equality, gender parity, among others. And more importantly, we'll recommit to finding a common and harmonized solution that our SADC parliaments can adapt to their country levels. Dear colleagues, I wish to end by saying that the SADC region is now at the crossroads, where more than ever, partners need to work together to protect women and young girls. Gender inequalities were not inexistent before COVID-19, and now they've become much more prominent. They've become much more visible. We therefore need to look for stronger collaboration with partners, including our civil society counterparts, who are encouraged to work with the forum and national parliaments to mainstream gender and achieve regional goals such as the Africa Agenda 2063, or fulfill international commitments such as 90-90-90 targets and the Sustainable Development Goals that are still relevant today as they were before COVID-19 outbreak. Allow me to end by quoting one of our distinguished judges in the United States who have motivated all of us everywhere else who are involved in this type of work. In the words of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I quote, "We'll continue fighting for the things that we care about, and we'll do it in a way that will lead others to join us." With these few words, I wish you all a very pleasant session. And I thank you for being present among all other commitments that you have. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, SG Secretary General, for this remark. Let me now call Mr. Hanai Shuma, who is currently the UNAID Regional Director for Eastern and Southern Africa, based in Johannesburg. Mr. Shuma has a great experience of United Nations, and he is a former resident coordinator in many countries. Mr. Shuma, you have the floor.
Thank you very much indeed, Christian. And let me start by acknowledging the presence of the Honorable Anne-Marie Bilambangu, who is the chairperson of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus. I want also to acknowledge Ms. Winnie Byanyima, the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and the UNAIDS Executive Director. And in addition to that, she's my boss. So we're delighted that she is here. It's a demonstration of a commitment to two things. One, during a tour of duty at UNAIDS to address this issue of adolescent girls and young women and the challenges that they face, not just in terms of HIV, but also the new challenge in terms of the impact of COVID-19. Dear Winnie, as we call you, I'm aware that you just arrived in Geneva from East Africa, and your presence here is particularly important, in part also because of your belief in the role of parliamentarians in general and women parliamentarians going forward. And of course, let me acknowledge the presence of the members of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus in their large numbers here present, which is an indication of how much you value this particular forum and also the issues it addresses. And of course, my sister, Boemo Sachoma, Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, a strong partner for UNAIDS. And earlier on, you expressed concern that Christian had changed your gender. I just want to respect and honor and celebrate and embrace your gender going forward, so we can be assured that's the view of UNAIDS. And of course, there's Ms. Nyasha Panisa Stole, the regional lead for Young Women's Leadership, Athena. I'm delighted that she's with us again, a young person, very articulate and very committed to the issues. Also, I have my esteemed United Nations colleagues and the young women that are participating in this very important debate. So for me, it is a rare privilege and indeed an honor to say a few words of welcome to this virtual forum on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on young women and adolescent girls in all their diversity, with particular emphasis on the critical role of parliamentarians in general, but also the SADC Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus in addressing this challenge. The challenge is huge, as you all know. And as it is right now, 3 in 5 new infections in 2019 were among women. And the incidence of HIV infections among adolescent girls and young women remains inordinately and unacceptably high. They are 2.5 times more likely than their male peers to acquire HIV infection. And every week in the SADC region, some 3,400 girls and young women are infected. and this is more than double the numbers of young men. The COVID-19 pandemic has indeed exacerbated existing gender inequalities and vulnerabilities. Extended confinement measures and restrictions on movement in most countries across the globe, compounded by economic and social difficulties brought on by the pandemic, have coincided with reports of increased numbers of women and girls facing abuse in many countries. The increase in the existing high level of vulnerability is fueled by a complex interplay of social, economic, and structural drivers, including poverty, gender inequality, unequal power relations, gender-based violence, social isolation, and limited access to schooling. To address this once and for all requires steadfast political leadership, commitment to action, and accountability. All parliamentarians in general, and women parliamentarians and youth advocates in particular, play a crucial role in responding to this huge challenge. The purpose of today's forum, as mentioned by my sister Boemo, is to facilitate the sharing of experiences, to identify strategies for parliamentarians to support the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The specific objectives of the forum include engaging with the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus in promoting women's rights and girls' rights to health in the measures aimed at curbing the spread of COVID-19. To promote continuous peer learning among parliamentarians, which is sharing of information, experiences, and challenges relating to and amidst the present COVID-19 pandemic, and to strengthen partnerships between generations, this by highlighting the importance of meaningful parliamentarian engagement for domestication of regional and national commitments on HIV and gender equality. By bringing all of us together here today, I hope that our engagement and voices will be strengthened and leveraged to push this important agenda forward and to make sure that no young people are left behind. As COVID-19 continues to impact the way we work, we must be innovative and adapt ourselves to a new way of thinking, new way of collaborating. And I want to salute the high-level virtual forum and the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus for their efforts in this respect. I also want to commend the excellent partnership we as UNAIDS enjoy with the SADC Parliamentary Forum through the many initiatives we're involved in, such as delivering on the commitments of the Chwane Declaration, which engaged speakers of national parliaments to respond to young people's sexual health challenges and needs in times of COVID-19. In addition, I'd like to mention the current joint work led by the SADC Parliamentary Forum to develop a gender-based violence model law, which we hope will contribute to realizing the full potential of women and girls to address gender-based violence in this region. And I want to thank you all for your attention. And as UNAIDS, we look forward to the outcomes of these deliberations as we push the agenda forward. So let me take this opportunity now to invite the Honorable Anne-Marie Bilambangu, who's the chairperson of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus, to give her remarks. Thank you. Is an applause? Okay.
Okay.
Honorable Chairperson, you have the floor. Have we lost her?
Interpretation.
Okay. Okay, very good.
Microphone. Oh, sorry. Kindly alert the Ronald host. Kindly alert the honorable member.
Oui, j'ai allumé. Je viens d'allumer. Merci. Ok, merci. Madame Winnie Bianyima, directrice exécutive de l'ONU-SUDA. Monsieur Aena Chouma, directeur régional pour l'Afrique de l'Est et du Sud de l'ONU-SIDA. Madame Baemo Mabou Segoma, secrétaire générale de SADC. Madame Nyasha Fanissa Sitole, représentante des leaders de jeunes femmes. Honorable député de l'Assemblée nationale de la région SADC et membre de SADC. Mes chères sœurs de la région Women Parliamentary Caucus, distingués invités. C'est pour moi un réel plaisir de présider cette cérémonie de vulgarisation des argumentaires religieux et traditionnels de lutte contre les violences basées sur le genre qui touchent les femmes et jeunes filles dans cette période difficile de la pandémie du COVID-19. Avant toute chose, je voudrais exprimer à tous et à toutes ma profonde gratitude pour avoir répondu favorablement à notre invitation à ce forum de haut niveau pour parler de cette question importante. Permettez-moi de remercier spécialement tous les responsables des organisations femmes et des jeunes femmes, en particulier qui se sont associés au réseau REPC dans ces processus pour leur présence et appui à la tenue effective de ces forums. Je voudrais aussi saisir cette occasion pour remercier du fond du cœur tous les partenaires, en particulier les programmes communs des Nations Unies de lutte contre le sida, qui nous accompagnent dans différents processus, par exemple, dans l'engagement des jeunes avec le président des parlements de la région SADC et actuellement dans le processus d'élaboration de la loi modèle pour lutter contre les violences basées sur le genre. Mesdames, Messieurs, les pays de la SADC ont ratifié l'ensemble des conventions internationales relatives aux droits de la femme et à l'égalité entre les sexes, notamment la Convention sur l'élimination de toute forme de discrimination à l'égard des femmes, ainsi que le protocole à la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples relatifs aux droits de la femme en Afrique. Les violences faites aux femmes sont une réalité dans le monde et les pays de la SADC n'en sont pas épargnés. Elles ont des conséquences néfastes importantes sur le plan humain, social et économique, et ceci au niveau des femmes, des enfants, des familles et de notre pays en général. Cette situation s'est aggravée depuis le début de la pandémie de COVID-19, où les cas de violences domestiques ont augmenté de manière significative, en particulier à la suite de mesures de confinement mises en place par le gouvernement pour contenir la propagation du virus. Les rapports de l'ONU Femmes montrent que certains pays du monde, en particulier ceux qui sont fortement touchés par le COVID-19, ont enregistré jusqu'à 30% d'augmentation des cas de violences domestiques signalés et environ 33% d'augmentation des appels d'urgence pour violences sexistes, les femmes et les filles étant les victimes de ces actes. S'il est très important que le gouvernement et les parties prenantes se concentrent sur les mesures visant à contenir le COVID-19 et que les établissements chargés de l'application de la loi se concentrent sur l'application de règlements et de mesures de COVID-19 dans les communautés, la violence domestique ne doit pas être négligée. Les pays de la SADC ont ratifié l'ensemble des conventions internationales relatives aux droits de la femme et à l'égalité entre les sexes, notamment la Convention sur l'élimination de toute forme de discrimination à l'égard des femmes, ainsi que les protocoles à la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples relatifs aux droits de la femme en Afrique. La situation est non seulement épouvantable, mais elle va à l'encontre de l'esprit et des principes même du protocole de la SADC sur le genre et le développement, de la stratégie régionale et du cadre d'action pour lutter contre la violence basée sur le genre entre 2018 et 2030, et de la stratégie régionale sur les femmes, la paix et la sécurité de 2018 à 2022, qui vise collectivement à renforcer durablement l'autonomie des femmes et des filles, à les protéger contre les violences sexuelles et sexistes. Plusieurs actions stratégiques et opérationnelles sont menées par le gouvernement, les parlements, la société civile, avec l'appui des partenaires internationaux en ligne, avec la stratégie nationale de lutte contre les violences basées sur le genre. Toutefois, la persistance de ces violences exige de nous de mobiliser tous les acteurs à tous les niveaux pour une réponse, incluant des mesures de prévention et des actions répressives plus efficaces. Puissions-nous tous, législateurs, exécutifs, secteur privé, société civile, médias et dirigeants communautaires, travailler ensemble pendant la crise de COVID-19, tout en tenant compte de l'impact de la crise sur les femmes et les hommes, les garçons et les filles. Avec cet effort, je réitère l'engagement du caucus régional des femmes parlementaires de travailler la main dans la main avec tous les partenaires et particulièrement l'ONUCIDA pour la protection et la promotion de la femme dans une dimension holistique, y compris les questions d'éducation de jeunes filles et les questions socio-économiques, afin d'accélérer les avancées dans notre combat commun contre les violences faites aux femmes pour mettre fin à ces doubles fléaux de COVID-19 et des violences basées sur le genre qui impactent énormément notre société. C'est ainsi que les objectifs du forum de haut niveau seront atteints si les échanges et les discussions permettent d'identifier les repères pour mieux utiliser les canaux parlementaires de la région et les relais nationaux en vue de l'élimination des violences faites aux femmes qui sont des atteintes aux droits humains. Le caucus régional des femmes parlementaires compte sur vous tous ici présents, y compris les organisations de femmes, de jeunes filles et des adolescents et les hommes, ainsi que les médias, pour partager les messages contenus dans les argumentaires pour augmenter la sensibilisation, le nombre d'hommes et de femmes qui œuvrent pour une région de la SADC sans violence basée sur le genre, une région SADC sans violence à l'égard des femmes et des filles. Je vous remercie pour votre attention. Je t'ai dit. Hein? Je comprends. connexion Internet instable.
Hello.
On. Okay.
The police said my skirt was too short, so it was my fault.
My boyfriend told me if I asked him to use a condom, he would leave me.
My husband kicked us out when he found out our child was HIV positive.
I was violated at my own school. I don't feel safe anymore.
When will the tide turn? When will men stop thinking women's bodies are their property? How do we change this? How do we stop this?
What helped me through it was sharing my story. I could talk and feel safe.
I need some help.
I also came to accept my HIV status.
I feel free. I believe in myself again.
Women want to be included in the conversation, the solution, and the process, because our bodies are our business.
Because our freedoms are fundamental.
We've got the power. We will fight for our rights.
Everyone is accountable. What about you? Join us. Let's end gender-based violence.
Donc, merci beaucoup. Donc, après cette vidéo, j'ai vraiment l'honneur et le plaisir d'inviter notre directrice exécutive de l'ONU-SIDA, Madame Winnie Bianima, pour son allocution. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, we can.
Thank you, yes. Honorable Mbilambangu, Member of Parliament and Chair of the SADC SADC Women's Parliamentary Caucus, Honorable Members of Parliament, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, activists, colleagues from UNAIDS who are here. It's a great pleasure to be able to join this meeting. And I really want to congratulate the Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum and my colleagues at UNAIDS who have organized this really important event to address how COVID-19 is impacting women and girls in this region. I'm also delighted to be part of this because I'm no stranger to the SADC Parliamentary Forum. I come from Uganda. I was elected 3 times to the Parliament of Uganda and served as a member of Parliament and as a chair of the Women's Caucus in my country. During that time, I was invited many times to support the SADC Parliamentary Forum and the Women's Caucus. I worked very closely with the Secretary General then, Kasuka Mtukwa, together with the gender advisor who was Rumizai, an amazing woman leader from Zimbabwe. And we did a lot of work with members of parliament in the region, and I developed many friendships there. So I'm delighted to be with you and to recall many things that this region has achieved on women's rights through the Women's Parliamentary Caucus, that you were trailblazers on the continent. I can recall that you were the first sub-regional economic community to have a declaration on gender and development. Way back in 1997, I supported your Women's Parliamentary Caucus push for it. I remember also the protocol, was it a protocol or, on violence against women? You were always leading in the African Union, and power to you. May you continue to lead on gender equality and women's rights. I'm looking forward to hearing in the conversation, if we get a chance, what you're doing as a women's caucus in the region, supporting national women's caucuses to push for gender equality and women's rights to the next level. Because, my sisters, let us, as we congratulate ourselves for what we've done, also note that progress is slow and uneven, even before COVID. Since the Beijing Platform for Action, the progress, for example, women in decision-making is very discouraging. In Beijing, we were at the parliamentary level at 18.4% women in parliaments globally. Today, 25 years later, it has moved by just 6 percentage points. We are at 24%. We have not reached the critical mass of 33% in parliaments globally. SADC is ahead, of course. It's the region with strong participation of women in parliaments. But there are still countries in SADC that aren't there yet, and the whole of Africa is not there yet. So we have a long way to go. Violence against women, not much progress to note on that front. We've achieved girls' equality at the primary school level. But at the secondary school level, a huge gap exists. The majority of our girls, 2/3, are not in a classroom at secondary school level. I'll come back to that. So even before COVID, we need to remember that our progress on women's rights was still slow. At the same time, we are increasing our numbers in parliament, but too slowly. So, I wanted to mention about violence against women, that 1 in 3 women experience violence from an intimate partner. It's unacceptable, and it's not changing fast enough. COVID has complicated things. I won't repeat what you have said already. You're so aware of the impacts of COVID. A pandemic or an epidemic always thrives and worsens existing inequalities. We saw that with HIV, and it's happening with COVID. Where there are inequalities, they widen. And so gender inequalities are widening. And the worst victims are our girls and young women. They were already facing huge challenges. Their situation is worsening. For me, the 2 biggest impacts that we really must work hard on are, 1, the millions of girls who have come back home, who are not in school, and who may never go back to school. It's estimated that 743 million girls came out of school in 185 countries, 743 million girls globally. Many of these are African girls. Many of these don't stand a chance to return to school because COVID not only has hurt our health, but has also crushed our economies. our countries don't have the money to keep services going, we're going to see cuts. I would like to talk a little about that. So, but that's a huge impact we must watch out for, because when a girl can't have those basic capabilities, education and health, she's not going to have a future. She will not rise. So getting that right, fighting for that in this situation of COVID and post-COVID is a critical challenge for you, my colleagues and friends of the SADC Women's Parliamentary Caucus. Organize, fight. That would be my first point to you. Organize to fight for girls to stay in school, for the budgets of education to even increase, so that girls have a chance to stay in school, to return to school, and to go and to continue. This is critical. It is my first advice. But to do that, honorable members of parliament, as you know, you have the power of the purse. It is you who approve the budgets. But to be able to defend a budget of education or any other budget, you need to understand how the macroeconomic policy framework is set. You must understand and engage on how macroeconomic targets, fiscal targets are set, and engage in that debate, because you can't be taken seriously if you insist that we must increase the budget of education and you are not able to contribute to how the total budget is set, how the tax policy is set, how the debt is incurred, how much can be borrowed, the limit there. If you can't engage in that total discussion, you cannot defend any budget. So my second advice is that as parliamentary women's caucuses, as regional women's caucus, invest heavily in understanding economic policy, budget policy, tax policy, and engage in those discussions today. They are critical. Our governments were already entering austerity because of high indebtedness. Now with COVID, the situation has completely been disrupted. It's much worse. These discussions on what are the priorities and how are the targets going to be set are for you. You cannot afford not to be a part of them. Train, bring experts to give you some basics. It's not rocket science. You can train in this. We did a lot of this similar work in the 90s, and we managed to get women parliamentarians to engage on economic policy issues and budget issues. So that would be my second advice. Be part of the discussions about economic recovery and defend girls' education, because it is critical. In that regard, I am leading an initiative with colleagues in the UNAIDS, in the UN Joint Program on HIV/AIDS. We call them co-sponsors. I'm leading this with UN Women, Executive Director Pumzile, together with UNICEF ED, together with my colleague at UNESCO and my colleague at UNFPA, 5 of us, all of us women. 4 of us are women of African descent. One is from Panama, but she's an African woman. And we are saying we are going to fight for girls to be in secondary school, because we know that when girls stay and finish secondary school, the chance of getting HIV is reduced by 50%. Can you imagine that? 50%. And if you add in more interventions on women's empowerment, you reduce it even further. So we are leading an initiative to persuade governments to invest in secondary education for girls and to support them with more initiatives to make the school space more empowering for girls so that they come out safe from HIV and empowered to live good lives. Join us in that. I will be coming back in the region to talk about that initiative, and you parliamentarians have an important role to play to push for this, to push your governments with our support, of course. The third point that I would want to raise to you, women parliamentarians of the region, is to fight hard on the issue of sexual and reproductive health and rights, as well as comprehensive sexuality education. These two, when you can bring them into school and get girls to access reproductive health services in school to learn about sexuality, and also boys to learn about sexuality, and at the same time put HIV services close by, integrated even, you really reduce the possibility of violence against girls, and you increase their chances of avoiding HIV infection. Comprehensive sexuality education, the biggest battle are the traditional forces, our traditional leaders and religious leaders. Politicians are very opportunistic on this issue because you will find that a male or a female politician wants her daughter to know about her body, even wants her to take a pill if she is having sex, but a politician will stand there and attack comprehensive sexuality education in order to please the mullahs, the priests, the cultural leaders. So there is an inconsistency between parents wanting their girls to be safe and leaders wanting to play to the gallery for traditional forces. It is you, women parliamentarians, who must face the country and work sensitively with these traditional leaders on the question of comprehensive sexuality education. It's not about teaching bad behavior. It's about educating a girl about her body, her safety, her choices, and how to live well. So Zambia recently made a huge success through its parliament. We commend them. My colleague is here who was supporting parliamentarians and civil society and government change agents to push for this. Make it part of your big agenda as the Women's Parliamentary Caucus. Push hard on this, combine it with sexual reproductive health services and HIV services that are accessible for girls and young women. Let us not try to use too much of a moral lens here and use the data. Let the data, the evidence guide us. We know so many girls are already having sex by the age of 14, 15. What do we want for them? Knowledge about their bodies, choices on how to protect themselves. So I leave that with you, but I count on you. I want to work with you to find sensitive ways to drive this agenda and protect our girls. The fourth point I would like to make, which would probably be my last one, is about leadership of women outside of parliament. I'm talking about leadership in communities. This is where change happens. It is the leadership of women holding their communities together that we can fight and beat COVID and also beat AIDS. It is women, you've said it, I've heard you say it here, most of you who've spoken. But supporting women's leadership is more than just words. It's driving resources into their hands. It's making sure that programs, government programs, actually put resources into the hands of women in their communities, the NGOs, the women in local government, the women who lead small groups on the ground, but mostly those who run services, health services, HIV services, the women volunteers, community health workers. This is where change happens for women, for girls. So let's defend, invest in women's leadership at the local level, at the grassroots level, to see the difference that can be there for girls. Let's not think that at our level in the parliaments, for me, sitting with the Secretary General at the United Nations, that those big positions will be what will make the difference. Yes, we have our role, but the change happens on the ground by ordinary women in their communities. Let me end by saying, for us at the United Nations, we are here to support you. It is you leaders who make an inspiring program, who invite us to support you. The Secretary General is leading by walking his talk. At the leadership level, he has invested in appointing women in senior positions. I'm one of them. I'm also the first one to lead UNAIDS. But across the system at the most senior levels, he has already achieved gender parity, 50-50. He's moving beyond 50-50. So we have a leadership that is pushing us hard on the question of delivering for women and girls and achieving gender equality, and we are here to serve you. So thank you for inviting me, Chairperson of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus and Honorable MPs. I can't wait to work with you in your region to continue leading and making change. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Madam Bianyima, for those excellent comments that I think parliamentarians may have taken note and perhaps may want to engage. Oh, is it still applauding? Okay, I think the applaud is finished, right? These fancy mechanical applauds are amazing, aren't they? Okay, I wanted to express my appreciation to Nicole, for these excellent points, particularly on the nature of the budgetary politics and the involvement of parliamentarians. The issue of the Education Plus initiatives and the importance of girls to stay in school, not just to go to school, but stay in school. That's what makes a difference in terms of their preparation for adult life, for economic choices and all. And the issue of comprehensive sexuality education, not just for girls, and I'm delighted to notice that for boys as well, you know, as young people, as children. And above all, the importance of community involvement, and as parliamentarians, the significance of mobilizing communities, basically, in this respect. And there were other excellent comments, of course, that were made by the Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, Beno Sahoma, and also by the chairperson of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus, Madam Anne-Marie Bilambangu. So what I'd like to do now, with permission, is that we open this up a little bit to comments and discussion and observations from the parliamentarians, really, who are the main interlocutors. And I want to assure Nyasha that we haven't forgotten. We're just taking a break to encourage a little bit of debate, and we'll come back and continue. We still have a bit of time. So my esteemed leaders, let me open this up to comments and suggestions from parliamentarians and others. You could just come in or maybe indicate by raising your hand, then I'll call upon you. Who would like to come in first? Honorable Talita, you
want me to say something? Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry to corner you, but you know.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. Yeah, you know, we did a very good presentation, a very good one. You know, the SG is from Botswana, I think she can also remember very well that, you know, during our times when we were still young, especially in secondary times, you know, there was a system whereby nurses come to the schools, coming with contraceptive, like condoms, pills, you know, everything for that, you know, to teach us. But nowadays, as a member of parliament, you know, I've been going through schools, but there's no longer this thing, because especially pregnancy at, you know, at a young level or I think at school, is due to, I think it's due to lack of knowledge of, or I don't know, but I think we have to take it back, you know, those old days that we have to take nurses to teach the young girls, especially at secondary level, the prevention method of avoiding pregnancy. Another thing we need to say is that, you know, leadership of women, especially, you know, we have to invest in leadership in women. It's very, very, very important on that, especially at rural areas. I think we need to talk, especially to our leadership, especially Khosi, to the chief, VDC, rural development committees. We have to talk to them. We have to teach them how to talk to kids, how to teach kids. I think it's very, very important. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Monahotla. And let me open to other interlocutors that would like to throw up a few comments and observations. There's Ambassador. Ambassador Kaza from
yes,
Zimbabwe.
yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Chuma. Thanks so much for the excellent presentation from Madam Winnie. I'm just wondering, to what extent has he done something as the UNAIDS global representative as far as women and internally displaced population settings? Because you find when you talk about access to comprehensive education, it's really limited in some settings around Africa. So we really wonder, to what extent can we expect something from UNAIDS, or how best can we make sure that our girls and young women are safeguarded as far as access for them to minimize multiple vulnerabilities that they are exposed to?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Honorable Gasa. Although we just saw half of your head, I think the camera wasn't quite well positioned. But we heard your point. So at some point we will respond to it on populations on the move and the impact of young girls.
Right.
Okay, the next speaker is Madame Louisa Damiaro. And if you could introduce yourself and take the floor.
Bom dia, muito obrigado. Queria saber se me estão a ouvir. Estou a ser ouvida.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Muito obrigada. Muito obrigada por me terem dado a palavra. Eu sou Luísa Damião, do Parlamento de Angola, e quero, em primeiro lugar, felicitar os organizadores deste fórum de alto nível que nos proporcionou comunicações bastante interessantes. Eu espero que tenhamos uma manhã muito rica e muito profícua em conhecimentos, e penso que nós, como parlamentares e agentes da mudança, devemos permanentemente trocar ideias e opiniões sobre temas tão importantes que nós abordamos hoje. E eu gostaria de referir-me à educação sexual nas escolas, que é um tema bastante importante. Mas antes de nós chegarmos à escola, essa educação deve começar nas famílias também. Devemos evitar os tabus de tratar de temas ligados à educação sexual com os nossos filhos. É importante que eles tenham esse conhecimento para quando cheguem à escola, nas aulas de educação sexual, não tenham nenhum problema em lidar com isso. Educando os nossos filhos, nós podemos evitar que eles cometam alguns erros. Há uma questão que foi abordada aqui também, que é o apoio à liderança nas comunidades, que eu concordo e reputo de muito importante. Nós precisamos empoderar as mulheres, precisamos capacitar as mulheres para que estas mulheres sejam também poderosos agentes da mudança nas suas comunidades. Portanto, é importante que nós, como parlamentares, troquemos de facto ideias e não fiquemos pelas palavras. Devemos passar à ação. E como é que nós devemos passar à ação? Propondo políticas no sentido de melhorarmos a educação sexual nas escolas, propondo políticas também para aumentarmos cada vez mais o orçamento ligado às questões da educação e da saúde, para que de facto haja essa estreita colaboração entre o poder legislativo e o poder executivo e podermos então cada vez mais cuidar desta franja que são as raparigas e as mulheres nas nossas sociedades. Porque a juventude é o presente e é também o futuro. E para isso elas devem estar educadas no verdadeiro sentido da palavra, para que possam também dar o seu valioso contributo nos seus países. Portanto, eu quero felicitar mais uma vez o Fórum Parlamentar da SADC e os seus parceiros por nos proporcionarem nesta manhã um rico debate sobre temas de capital importância. Muito obrigada a todos pela vossa especial atenção e permitam-me cumprimentar especialmente a nossa secretária-geral, Boemo Secoma. Obrigada por organizar este fórum. Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Damia, and for the raising those issues. I'd like to open the floor to other honorable parliamentarians that would like to make a contribution to the debate. Geraldine. Okay, Madam Geraldine Ucha, I believe you have the floor. Maybe you need to introduce yourself in full because we don't see the full text here. Are you there? Okay. Boemo, do you want to come in and share your thoughts on this while we're trying to find...
Obrigado.
Yeah.
Obrigado.
Nada.
I think we should encourage other members to make input. I saw Honorable Mosena from Lesotho.
Okay.
I'm sure she would have something to say.
Mosena from Lesotho.
Honorable Sepa Mosena from Lesotho.
Okay. You have the floor?
Yes.
Oh, there you are. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you so much. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I must say the presentations have been very informative, particularly jumping to this one that we've had of UNAIDS, the introductory remarks by the SG and our chair have been very insightful and opened up for us to get engaged in this debate. Now, coming to UNAIDS, thank you so much for highlighting some of the important issues vis-a-vis women and young girls as far as COVID-19 is concerned. And I must really attest that what you've alluded to, Winnie, that politicians are opportunistic, that is so very true. It's true because as women, we always try to find a balance, you know. You try to remain a woman of responsibility in society, and therefore there are some things that you try to stay away from, because now you are also trying to fight for your space as a leader, and you don't want to be appearing to be promoting certain things. So there's a very fine balance, but you are right, because we want our children, the ones that we stay with in our houses, we want them to, you know, steer clear of any environments that they might find themselves in, where they could now become, they can join the statistics. But we find it very, very difficult to talk to the larger crowd. I have personally tried to fight this barrier. As a woman MP, I have engaged with young girls and actually started engaging on the topic of safe sex, issues of abortion, issues of financing themselves, leadership, etc. It's not a very easy thing to do, but I found the response quite welcomed by the seniors, the mothers, even the girls themselves, because it's also not an easy topic for their parents to engage in their families. But during the time of COVID, we have yesterday in Parliament, our chairperson of HIV and AIDS, she was presenting a report on the status of HIV during the pandemic, the times of pandemic. And it really confirmed what you have just said, much as we're talking about, yes, we're talking in the circle of COVID-19, but it did confirm that gender-based violence has increased during times of COVID, and the victims are women and young girls. It has also confirmed that there is less support from our government institutions, from our security forces, the police, etc., for when women are faced with this uncomfortable situation. So yes, COVID-19 has exacerbated the
Thank you, Mai.
Sorry? Okay, thank you. Now, another area, another dimension that we must focus on as women is trying to engage young women into this space that we are in, because there seems to be a disjoint between women in leadership, women taking care of this gender issues, and young girls getting into politics. That is still something that is very much sort of discouraged, because politics are not considered as a very clean environment, etc. So young girls steer clear from them. And as a result, you find that the issues we're trying to work against are impossible, because we don't have these young girls that we want to bring along and to address the same issues. Now, looking at us here, for example, we don't have a lot of young women parliamentarians that could be talking and engaging, addressing the issues from the perspective of a young woman or a young girl. So these are some of the things that we really need to incorporate as women, women's caucus, for example, because our job is to make sure that we engage other young girls and speak for other women. So my issues were only those two: engaging young women to now get into the space so that nothing about them without them, and also ensuring that we get out and address the issues as women MPs. The problem still persists, and engaging like this gives us the motivation that we should still go on. It's not only the problem in our countries, but in our region as a whole. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed for those comments, Honorable Mosena. For now, I would like to invite Honorable Geraldino Uchavo Bonifacio. If you could introduce yourself and then take the floor.
If I may also just add, we have Honorable Ruth Labode.
Okay.
You can add to the list, Honorable Bilankulu and Honorable Pumelele Princess Dlamini. You could add to the list, thank you.
If you get the list of all the people, just write them down for me. Okay, thank you. Okay, Honorable Geraldino, you have the floor. And then there will be 3 others after you. Hello, Honorable Uchavo Bonifacio. Are you there? Okay, we can come back to you. Okay. And then let me call on the next available, which is Honorable Bilankulo from South Africa, I believe. Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Thank you very.
You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Kensani Bilankulu. Yes, I'm from the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa. Firstly, I would like to thank and commend all the presenters and also give my greetings to the regional secretary and the chairperson of regional parliamentary women's caucus. I would also want to agree with the SG when she said the rights of women need to be realized. And I believe that before anybody else can realize that rights of women, it's only us as women that need to think about ourselves. Before we think of our male counterparts to take care of our girl child or to educate them, it needs us as women to educate those girl child or girl children. The impact of COVID-19 towards women and girls, it's severe. Let me indicate that as women, it's like we I don't know whether it's poverty or what that make us not, as if we don't think enough. Because before we talk about COVID-19 or whatever, we need to talk about ourselves as women. Do we realize we realize or commend other women when it comes to even the position of work? When we go for conferences, I want to give an example. Do we sometimes sit as women, start talking about women, or we wait for men to come and influence us in order to talk about them than to talking about ourselves? It's like women always we undermine ourselves as if we don't have capacity, but we need to be told. I want also to agree with the previous speaker to say, before we think of a girl child being educated in school, we need to start in our families, or we need to start at home educating our own children. Let's take an example of a single parent. In most cases, the abuse that we see happening in families, you may find that the mother is protecting the husband than protecting a girl child. And by so doing, what do we expect? Do you think a girl child next door can be secure or can be protected by that woman who is failing to take care of her own child. So to me, whatever consequences that we are facing, it starts with us. I don't know whether I will say we must start somewhere. We refrain from what we're doing and we start something new as women. I don't have that, the method that we are going to use in order to find ourselves or to find a stand of ourselves as women to say, here we are now ready to tackle each and everything the way it's supposed to be done. We may talk of COVID-19, we're talking about HIV and AIDS, we're talking about the GBV, that the way we are experiencing COVID-19 and the way we experience GBV now, it's at the same level. But you may find that a lot of cases, if I may give an example, they were not reported simply because women are trying to cover up or to save their marriages instead of saving their lives or saving their children's life. They feel it's better to save their counterpart. So I don't know, but I think we still need to be educated, and more especially women at the far rural areas or communities. I will propose that when we have our conversation or we have our conferences, can't we make sure that most areas where we are going to have these deliberations should be in rural areas? Because a lot of women who are staying there, they don't have knowledge of anything. They don't know what's happening. They will hear about a lot of things after those things they have been spoken about several times, meaning that we are doing something. There are those that are a step ahead, but we are leaving a lot of women behind us. Those women, and I think they were supposed to assist us in fighting the scourge of violence or whatever depression that we are coming across as women. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Honorable Bilankulu. Let me invite Honorable Ruth Laborde, and then followed by two others, and then we can close this session and request the panelists to comment. Okay, thank you. Honorable Ruth Laborde, you have the floor. Just introduce yourself. You might want to tell us about your constituency as well. And try and put your video on, I think. Yeah.
I'm trying to put it in. Wait, okay. My video. Unmute me, Bill.
Okay, if possible. Fine, yes, thank you.
Oh, so Chair, you wanted to see us?
Yes.
Well,
am I okay?
Okay.
I think your colleagues wanted to see you. You look fine. To me. You have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Ruth Laborde. I'm a member of parliament for Zimbabwe and a member of the caucus also, and a survivor of COVID.
Oh, Makorokota.
Before I survived the COVID, before I even had COVID, I had a webinar or virtual meetings on how I should be responding to or advising the ministry, almost 6 to 5 per day. Until I had COVID, then I then began to understand the challenges of having COVID, the isolation, but until then we were only talking about issues affecting the youth, and especially the access to contraceptives, the access to art, the access to the increase in the gender-based violence, because families were not used to spending the whole day together. And so we were now hearing in the newspapers, a husband died because the wife hit him with an axe because they're watching TV All those things came out. But we did discuss. But what I believe was our biggest problem during COVID was we did not plan for going into COVID. We followed what South Africa has done. Because of that, we were not ready. We could actually easily have put in mobile clinics to move around, especially the high densities where the poor live, and provide services like contraceptives, basic treatment, ARVs, and TB drugs. But because we just said, boom, we have closed, everybody stay where you are. So there was nobody to plan for that. That is that for COVID. But I really wanted to talk about the comprehensive sexual education law that was passed in Zimbabwe not long ago. I saw that law as the best thing that has happened for us as SRH activists or advocates. Now, our act on comprehensive sexual education says, not only will the youth be taught about their sexuality, but if a girl gets pregnant, they'll be allowed to stay in school and then go and deliver, given a maternity leave, go and deliver, and then come back to school if they want to come back to school. But what is important for me as an advocate for certain issues like age of consent to access health services, which has been a challenge for us, and the reviewing of the Termination of Pregnancy Act. The fact that we have assented to the comprehensive sexual education, it means now we can comfortably say every minor who is in school, if they are allowed to stay in when they are pregnant, they should all be allowed to go for health service. So for me, the CSE is now a key. It is opening one door, which we are now currently working on. We are going for public hearings, and you must pray for us. It's a huge controversial issue, but I believe we will win this one also. And if we win, if we change the law on access for the minors to access health services, including post-abortal care, it means the same CSE will open a door for discussion and reviewing of the Termination of Pregnancy Act. So it's exciting while we were seated around doing nothing, but we're entering a very exciting year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, particularly on the specific legislative initiatives that, of course, you will share with your colleagues. I'd like to invite Honorable Princess Dlamini to take the floor and share the thoughts and experience and observations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Honorable Dlamini, are you on? Okay. Maybe we can come back. For now, let me also invite a non-parliamentarian, but a very interested partner. Are you there now?
Hello.
Oh, okay, Senator Princess Dlamini, sorry. Yes, you have the floor, Madam.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Program Director, for giving me the floor. As you have already introduced me, I won't go back to my name again. I'll just go straight to the presentation.
Okay, that's useful.
Okay, I'll just share a summary of what happened in our country. It's
okay. Senator Princess, would you be able to remove your mask because we can't hear you clearly?
Okay.
As you speak. Yes.
Okay, do you hear me now?
Indeed. Yes, we can hear you now. So if you could just summarize your thoughts in a few minutes because we're pressed for time. Thank you.
Okay, I'll read what I have in front of me. In Eswatini, the coronavirus is in Eswatini, women are serving on the front line as medical professionals, emergency workers, caregivers, and essential personnel who are outrageously stepping up and responding to the needs of those affected by the pandemic. as caregivers of the sick, insurers of cleanliness, and providers of cleanliness equipment and materials, women have to provide hand washing water in the advent of scarcity of clean drinking water, prioritize the provision of soap at the expense of the most pressing need, which is food, in the advent of hunger and poverty. COVID-19 has also affected a special group of people, and these are unemployed women, pre-teenage and teenage mothers, and women in small medium enterprises who have special needs, including women with disabilities, adolescent girls and women. Consequences of COVID-19 have a growing impact on the national economy, causing increased vulnerability and food insecurity in my country. It exacerbates poverty and gender-based violence, as the other presenters mentioned, that remains high in the country. Women and girls in Eswatini constitute a population of about 562,127, which is 53% of the overall population. The hard-hit places by COVID is the rural poor. Since poverty affects more people in the rural areas, Lubombo and the Shiselweni regions were hard hit. In Manzini and Wowo regions, there seem to be persistently high and somewhat increasing poverty in the Lubombo region. Further to this, 38.9% of the working population lives below the national poverty line, working poor. This denotes special needs. Women in my country dominate the majority share of the small and medium enterprises, SMEs, which include saloons, hawking, cross-border trade, vending around schools and business areas, textile industries, among others. The announcement of the partial lockdown has resulted to hunger to a larger share of these women and youth losing their means of livelihood. According to a study conducted by Small Enterprises Development Company, which is SETCO, in collaboration with the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Trade, on the impact of COVID-19 on SMEs in Eswatini, confirmed that 75.3% of the respondents reported a reduced demand for their goods and services, whereas 31.12% were owned. Should I continue also?
Perhaps we'll give you one more minute. And I think what we will do is that we'll be grateful to receive your prepared statement. Then it will be a record of these deliberations. But we're pressed for time. So if you could maybe make your final point, then we can move on. Yes, thank you.
I can only say it is clear that as the partial lockdown was extended, more women businesses had to shut down. This was due to that they couldn't afford rent. Meanwhile, there were no profits generated, yet bills such as renters had to be paid. I can stop there.
Thank you very much indeed, Princess, and my apologies for cutting you short. And but we want to bring in a few more people. I think if you agree, what I'd like to do now is to maybe invite Winnie and maybe the chairperson as well to make some observations on the issues that have been flagged by the parliamentarians. There were also other issues that appeared in the chat box, for example, about how parliamentarians work with religious leaders in addressing some of the issues, particularly as they pertain to our key concern here of adolescent girls and young people. And this was an issue in Zambia, and it's been flagged from Zambia. But for now, if you agree, let me just invite Winnie to comment a little bit on some of the issues. Some of the issues is just ideas and experiences and comments, so not questions per se. So I would just like to request you to pick one or two issues that struck you as particularly urgent in this debate. Winnie, are you there?
Yes, Elias,
yes. Sorry.
For your moderation. And indeed, I find these contributions from members of parliament very thoughtful, and they are coming from, it's clear they are leaders who know their ground and who understand their roles really well. There was one particular question about people on the move. It was a very important question because on our continent here, we are seeing more and more displacement, not less. Displacement due to conflict. Conflict has racked the Sahel region really, really badly. We are looking at states that are almost on the point of being called failed states, where whole regions, schools have closed, clinics have closed, homes abandoned, and this is happening across the region, but also other regions. So, and we know that in the kinds of displacements we have, whether climate-induced or conflict or disasters like earthquakes, that the majority of the people you find in these IDPs or across borders as refugees are women and children. So you're talking about huge issues of protection of women and girls. And for us, as women, we need to own this issue and be forceful about it too. First of all, that our countries should have more open, progressive policies about accepting refugees. We are African people with a common history and a common destiny. So progressive policies about borders and allowing people on the move to benefit from living within communities and services is a very important area where we can have a voice as women leaders. I can even leave that to Aeneas, who is an experienced humanitarian leader, to talk about that. Within that, we have to look at the protection of girls and women. That girls and women crossing borders, leaving homes, continue to benefit from safety at home, services near the home, lighting to benefit them, to reduce the risk of violence, HIV and health services, sexual and reproductive health services to be brought under in ways that are friendly to particularly young women and girls. This is going to be an important area in our new strategy, which we are preparing, because we see that displacement is on the rise and not on the decrease. And the issues of women and girls and their health are critical there. So thank you for raising it. And I can leave it also to Aeneas to add. I heard many good things. Only one I want. First, to congratulate you, Honorable Ruth Labode, for being a survivor of COVID and talking about it openly. That's strong leadership, because you can talk and help others. There is stigma growing around COVID. I've just come back from Uganda, and you see people afraid of talking about being positive for COVID and sharing their experience and helping others to avoid. We have also seen, we've done some studies as UNAIDS in the region about, we've seen people being targeted, certain groups of people, like gay men, like sex workers, like even prisoners. We are seeing more and more vulnerable people being made further vulnerable, more vulnerable in the context of COVID. So thank you for your leadership, for talking about it and helping to take away the stigma and to face it. So I don't want to comment on all the points because they were all very valuable points made, and I can only agree with them. My last one is by Honorable Bilankulu about challenging ourselves as leaders to walk our talk. Women's movement, we have been good at this, particularly in the feminist movement. We've been good at this because we work on conscientizing ourselves, and our belief is that you start with power within yourself. You must gain your power. You must be able to know your strengths, achieve your own agency, and then be able to influence around yourself. And this is important. The Women's Caucus should always give time to issues of discussing our own ability to live equality in our lives and therefore claim it for others whom we lead. So thank you. Conscientization is key. Thank you all. I am enjoying this discussion.
Thank you very much indeed, Winnie. As you said, you can comment on all the issues, but because there were comments, there were suggestions, there were experiences, and they were excellent, and we took note of that. I think the debate has largely been around the challenges faced by adolescent girls and young women. And in light of the response, historically, HIV response, vulnerabilities, but also in light of the COVID-19, which has not improved the type of challenges that this particular group or demographic of the population faces. What we'd like to do now is to invite Nyasha Sitole, who is the regional lead for Young Women's Leadership, Athena, to share thoughts and observations as it were. Nyasha speaks very well, and I've encouraged her to speak from the heart, rather than read a statement. And I know she speaks very well. And then thereafter we can talk a little more, and then with permission from Boemo, we can bring the matter to a close. Okay, Nyasha, are you on?
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Enes Chuma. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes,
good afternoon, distinguished members of the SADC Parliamentary, distinguished panelists for this high-level forum, distinguished participants, all protocols observed. I have a very, very long speech or talking points with me, but I'm very cognizant of the time. And I should say, I think I feel kind of like a bit disappointed that I'm going to speak whilst we are almost closing. But I guess maybe that's an opportunity for me to be able to just reiterate a few points that I feel are very necessary, especially as we're going to discuss about the linkages and leadership for adolescent girls and young women in the region when it comes to dealing with COVID-19 and all the other challenges that we are currently facing. So I think it is like a public secret that for us as adolescent girls and young women, COVID-19 greatly shifted the ways we live our lives, posed a threat to our very existence, and put our rights and lives at risk. And it has been a very, very challenging time for all of us because we were thrown into the deep end that we have never experienced before. I think when HIV and AIDS came into existence in the 1980s, the young people or adolescent girls and young women of this generation, some of us were not even born, but now this is the first time for us to experience this kind of a pandemic. And as it continues to unfold, it bears the inequalities and inequities and injustices that have plagued the world over time. And COVID-19 has reinforced these inequalities across race, gender, age, and across countries. and particularly increasing the vulnerability of adolescent girls and young women when it comes to HIV and AIDS. So what we are currently witnessing is also the data that we have for this year is very, very worrisome. With all the statistics that are showing us, we have almost 6,000 young women getting infected with HIV in Eastern and Southern Africa, where we have more than 1/3 of women in the world experiencing physical.
Can I request those that are not speaking to mute your microphones, please?
But they can't participate until
Okay.
we have all spoken.
Nyasha, can you go on, please?
All right, thank you. So we're talking about 35% of women in the world experiencing partner intimate violence. And when I think of all the statistics that we currently have and looking at how the COVID-19 situation exposed women and girls, where we ended up staying for 24 hours, 7 days a week with the abusers within our home, where we then ended up not being able to go and access sexual and reproductive health and rights information and services, for example, contraception resupply due to travel restrictions within our countries due to COVID-19, where girls ended up not going to school and were eventually married off, or one can just imagine what the statistics for 2020 or 2021 will be like unless we decide to act very fast and in collaboration. It is also a desire for every adolescent girl and young woman who is growing up in this region that we need to grow up in a safe world where we are treated with equity and dignity, a world where policies, which I believe that this is the role of the parliamentarians, to make sure that the policies that are in place do not harm, but actually provide protection and safety for adolescent girls and young women, and also promote and make it possible for us to be able to express ourselves regardless of our HIV status, sexuality, religion, or even political affiliation. We also wish to be part of this leadership process and be part of the decision-making platforms. And it is also our dream that we will be able to live in an ideal world where we can access quality HIV prevention and SRHR services, and where we are able to even mobilize, collaborate, and engage in leadership and advocates for our empowerment and growth. However, with the current challenges that I've already mentioned that were already in existence before COVID-19, but because COVID-19 came through and just shed a limelight on these challenges, things have become even worse for us. And what we would really recommend as we're going forth, which I'll try to really speak on what exactly do we need, because I've heard a lot about how already right now some countries are struggling with COVID-19 and already going into the first stages that we had of total lockdown for COVID-19. And what worries us as adolescent girls and young women is to think about our countries, our health ministries, our education ministries, who are, for example, currently in Zimbabwe, there's been a first opening for schools. But the worry is if COVID-19 hits us for the second time or the second wave comes, will we be able to manage and employ innovative approaches and strategies that will enable us to reach adolescent girls and young women with the services that we need? I don't think we're yet prepared to deal with that. So I think there is really need for us to look into the pandemic of COVID-19, not as just as something that is passing, but something that we might stay with for quite a long time and borrow some lessons from how the HIV and AIDS responses managed this pandemic. Because what we really need right now is to have enabling legal environments and laws that can protect girls and young women when it comes to how they are exposed to gender-based violence, when it comes to accessing their education, regardless of whether there's COVID-19 or not, whether they've managed to go back to school or they are still within their homes. We need programs and policies that are going to address the human rights and gender-related factors for adolescent girls and young women. And for me, I would say to the SADC Parliamentary Forum Regional Women's Caucus to say that, adolescent girls and young women in Africa or in sub-Saharan Africa or in Eastern and Southern Africa or SADC, we are depending on you because you have the privilege of being in high-level spaces that sometimes we cannot be able to access. And what we are depending on you is for you to provide guidance to our countries on how we can manage COVID-19, at the same time ensuring that the rights of women and girls are not compromised. The second thing that we would like to propose as adolescent girls and young women is to ensure that the partnerships and collaborations between girls and young women in their diversity and the SADC PF is strengthened. I like the point that was said by Winnie Banyama earlier on around engagement of communities, and that same point was also reiterated by the Honorable MP from Lesotho, who, according, if I'm able to quote her, she said there is a disjointment between women in leadership and women and girls in the community. And as long as that disjointment continues to exist, then the movement that we are trying to build in the region for us to be able to work together as a strong movement of women and girls and to speak in one voice and to be able to shake the patriarchal system in the region and dismantle the harmful and gender and cultural norms that continue to make girls and young women vulnerable will not succeed. So I would like to really call on a strengthened partnership. And I love the other MP also spoke like, how about when we do our meetings, we consider how we can actually go into the rural areas or go and meet the women and girls who are more vulnerable so that their voices can be heard. Finally, I would say for me, this meeting would be the best for 2020 as an action-oriented meeting between the SADC PF Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus and UNAIDS and all stakeholders here present. If we can be able to then collaborate to even further plan regional conventions or even country-level conventions to enhance the leadership of girls and young women in the region as a collective voice, and for us to be able to create a strong organized movement to ensure we achieve the change we want and do not go down to the effects of COVID-19. So for me, this is a proposal, and as a Athena network, the network that I'm currently working with, we are actually ready to be hosting the SADC PF Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus so that we can even have further conversations where we can have ample time for you to be listening to adolescent girls and young women in their diversity and to the proposals that they can bring on board and how we can collaboratively work together and propose solutions to the challenges we are currently facing during this period of COVID-19 and beyond, and the challenges that we faced even before COVID-19 came, and how we can fast track everything. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much indeed. And on that last very specific proposal, I think we will work closely under the leadership of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, and in particular, Boemo, the Secretary General, to see how we can take this forward. And I think your points are well noted, and I apologize that we didn't give you enough time, or as much time as you would have wanted. The others too that I could not because we were pressed for time. But I think you made your points very well, and I think it's very much appreciated. And we'll continue to engage. I believe you were not amused by me not giving you enough time, but that's okay. It's the price one pays for being a moderator. But I think we've covered a lot of issues, and I'd like to. Are there any comments from the chairperson or from Winnie before I invite Ms. Boemo Sahoma to give the final comments? Anything that comes to mind quickly? No, okay.
Nothing.
All right, excellent. All right, I think there are lots of issues here. We're going to prepare a report and a communique which covers the issues that have been flagged here and possible areas of follow-up, of course, under and in partnership and under the leadership of the SADC Parliamentary Forum. So in this respect, I would like to invite my sister Boemo to say concluding words. Boemo, are you there?
I am here, sir.
Yes, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, just to really appreciate all the discussions that are quite critical and important. And I believe that this should lead us to the next phase of how we could deal with the various pockets that have come up and programmed for the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus. And I'd also like to invite our partners to really join in and take the pie that is relevant to the method of delivery or the thematic issue, so that the Regional Women Parliamentary Caucus is actually empowered to lead. And this brings me to, just key issues that have been raised. I think the issue of leadership of women in Parliament is critical. The key words there was that let's defend and invest in this type of leadership. And this is where the collaboration, the nexus for cooperation is actually quite critical. Another issue that was raised was the issue of resources, that we can break that down into various bits and pieces. Those could be technical, those could be looked at in terms of financial for members of parliament in some instances. Now with COVID, I think this needs to be looked at critically in terms of e-governance and ICT, so that we are responsive to the challenges that COVID brings to the table for all of us to be able to do what we can do better as members of parliament. There is an issue around organizing and ensuring that we put at center stage the protection of young girls and women, which I believe that is critical, that we should take forward. And this is really said in recognition of the fact that we notice the numbers that are going up around gender-based violence. We notice the grave violations of human rights around education, around barriers, if you like, to reproductive health that prevents young girls or women in schools to be able to achieve their full potential because of unintended pregnancies, among others. And I believe that the clarion call there was that let's accelerate. If it's a commitment, let's accelerate the implementation of legislation in your country or policy to ensure that we have strong safeguards against the protection, against abuse, if any, around lack of access, against gender inequalities, around poor application of laws that are passed in parliaments or budgets that are passed in parliaments. Let's guard against stigma, which leads ultimately to violation of human rights of women and girls. I'm not going to go into the key issues because this will be looked into in terms of the communique that's going to be looked at, but it was indisputable that violence continued to be borne disproportionately, apologies, by women and girls. And I think we need to look at how we can look into this, especially in the lower cadres of our society. We need to look at this far away from the capital cities because the status of women and girls differs. The cost of living differs from the city to the far-flung village to villages that are nearer to the cities. Another issue that was stressed broadly was around parliamentary oversight. Parliamentary oversight could be looked at in terms of the representative role, the budgetary role. This was spoken to a lot, and I'm happy that the issue of macroeconomics and fiscal policy was mentioned by Ms. Winnie from UNAIDS, in the sense that the SADC PF is in the process of developing the SADC model law on public financial management, which brings on board these critical issues that we need to look into. Another model law that we're looking at, which is an issue that members of parliament can look into critically and follow in terms of the poor application of gender-based violence related laws or any human rights violations, stigma and discrimination, is the one that we spoke about earlier on by my colleague Ines from UNAIDS, who mentioned the gender-based violence model law. And therefore I believe that we will be able to look at macroeconomic level issues. We'll look at GBV with increased costs now because of COVID. We'll look at medical treatment care, social service and welfare, administration and judicial proceedings by members of parliament in the oversight role. I believe that with those few words, some issues were not mentioned, but they can be parked under the role of patriarchy in making our members of parliament complicit, if any, in not speaking out and debating issues thoroughly that pertain to what is coming out currently on issues of COVID and the relationship between HIV, sexual reproductive health and rights. And I believe that as duty bearers, there was a clear call from the youth represented by Nyasha to ensure that your duty as members of parliament is honored. Your duty as duty bearers towards honoring accepted norms and standards and the elimination of violence is honored. And that at the end of the day, we bring on board issues related to culture, issues related to working with other religious communities and ensuring that nothing is left in vain and that this dialogue becomes really one of those that will be etched in the memories of the young people as one that has been productive, collaborative, and that members of parliament would take to the table through consensus, concrete actions to end gender inequalities, including GBV. I could list poverty, among others. And I think that is what I committed to memory for now. And I would like to, to allow the other players who are on board to contribute to our communique as we make it much more robust. We talked about internally displaced populations, we should not forget that. And that is an area where we deliberately integrated in the model law for gender-based violence at the SADC Parliamentary Forum. So with these few words, sincere appreciation extends to you, my colleague at UNAIDS, for ensuring that this becomes a reality. Sincere appreciation for our dear sister, Ms. Winnie, for taking her time out, to the chairperson of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus, who has hit the ground running from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and who we would really, really want to extend our appreciation. And we hope that when the DRC hosts the 48th Plenary Assembly of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, we shall see side meetings discussing some of these key issues to exemplify the role and leadership of women. We can link this to the issue of appropriation and budgets because it will be a budget plenary. I hope partners who are listening out there will support our chairperson and the Regional Women Parliamentary Caucus. I thank you and wish you a good evening.
Thank you. Little applause machine there. It's coming. Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed. I think we can speak after you. I think that is inappropriate in terms of protocol. But still, we're among friends and we're truly grateful for this opportunity. And we look forward to, we value our partnership and we look forward to strengthening it on issues of common interest going forward. Excellent job. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. This is the applause, right? Yeah. Where did you get it from? Better than I thought.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Madame la, merci beaucoup. Ah, Caris, merci. Bravo, Madame la Présidente.
Yeah, boa tarde.
Okay, thank you very much, Adi, for good moderation. We get more than 100 4 participants across the region. That's good.